the studio at McGill University. The project is called Living Testimonies. I'm Professor Yehudi Lindeman from the Department of English at McGill University, and I'm one of the interviewers. The other interviewer is my colleague here, Renata Skotniczka-Zeidman from Montreal, and we are interviewing today Leah Kaufman. And Leah is a survivor from Romania. I should add that today is the 11th of February, 1992. Leah, I think Renata is continuing with the questioning, but maybe we can get started and you can just sort of introduce yourself, your family, and whatever you know about your mother and father and siblings, and take it from there. Maybe talk a little bit about your background, what your father did, etc.
Okay. I'm from Romania. When the war caught up with me, I was living in a small city called Herța. It was part of Moldova. Sometimes it was Bukovina and sometimes it was Moldova, as it depends on how they settled between them, those who wished to own it. However, I was one of 7 children. I was the youngest in my family. I had 3 brothers. We were 4 girls and 3 boys. And my mother and my father. There were 2 other boys, older ones. When my father married my mother, he had 2 young children, but they lived away in Bucharest. The names of my father are Samuel Buimaș and my mother Bracha. My brothers and sisters are, according to their ages, Nathan, Chaim, Ben Zion, and then I had twin sisters, identical twins, Rivka and Liba, and a little sister, Dvorah, and myself. My father, who I don't have actually a clear memory of either of my parents because they changed so drastically as events overtook us. But my father was a merchant in clothing, and my mother was midwife and a healer. She did not restrict her skills to the Jewish community, although my parents were extremely Orthodox, Hasidim. Whoever needed help, they came and called my mother, as she was known as Doamna Bracha. And be it a child to be born or be it a person that was sick, I often went with my mother. I was extremely attached to her. And I would watch her, how she would heal people. I don't remember going to a birth, but I do remember her putting on what is known in Yiddish as bankis. When a person has something with the lungs, I really don't know how to describe it. They put alcohol into a glass, and the fire gets the glass very hot, and then they put it onto the back of a person, correct? And it draws out the disease from the person.
Suction cups.
Like suction cups, exactly. And also piokis they used to use, these little leeches to draw out the bad blood. They always horrified me, but I was fascinated how my mother knew which ones were right and how quickly people would get better. It was amazing. I do remember my father vaguely, as I said, because when he wasn't working, he was often in the synagogue studying. And on many occasions, I remember sitting on his lap when I wanted to communicate while he was learning. I was sitting on his lap and taking it in. My mother was a great Baalat Chesed. She was a person who would wake up every morning, whom can I help today? And she's lived with me. For me, I've never said goodbye to her. She's within me, and I've mourned her always. And I've tried to emulate her. She really is my hero. And I try to be like her, although it's very difficult. I had no idea that things were coming to such a bad end. I was a careless little child, pampered. It's amazing how God prepares a person for what is to come. I was a very sickly child. Any disease that came into the city, I got it. And I remember being isolated in the hospital on several occasions. And it prepared me for the war, because all my friends who didn't have these diseases and got them, they just had no chance. They died. And during the war, I was pretty healthy. Amazing how weak and feeble, how strong one can become in a time of stress. The war for me began very suddenly. You know, it's like chicken licking, the sky came falling down, and this is the way it was for me. I was getting ready to start grade 4. I loved school.
Age. Your age. How old were you?
How old were you? How old were you?
How old I was? I was 9 years old.
In what year?
When this whole nightmare began. In 1941, I was 9 years old. I was about to start grade 4, and I very anxiously went to see my marks that were usually posted on the window of the school. And I was very thrilled because, as usual, I did extremely well, and I really looked forward to starting school.
What year?
1941.
And what month?
It must have been September, although it's possible, as you said in the research, the death march started in November, but we never started school. We were running. The bombs started falling, and we were trying to escape the bombs. We were trying to escape the Iron Guards who were looking for the Jews to kill them.
But none of this is happening now yet. Now we're, like, say, in late August, early September 1941.
1941.
You were
yes.
looking at your marks, meaning the marks of the year before.
Of the year before.
And you're happy?
I beg your pardon?
You're happy?
Extremely. I was an extremely good student. I loved school. In fact, many times I was wondering what affected me more, the war or the fact that I was deprived of an education, of a normal education. During the war, I used to see children going to school, and for this I envied them. My whole life collapsed with the bombs falling, and then the lineups to be shot and then not to be shot. They played with us. And then...
Can you be a little bit more specific, Leah? I mean, I'm very intrigued by the transition. You're looking at your marks, it's like school hasn't quite started yet, and then you say, the sky came falling down. To me, that's I'm sure that you have particular images with that. Could you give us some of these images?
Okay.
I'm talking about remembered images, and things that specifically happened. Also, did Germans appear suddenly in the town? In what was going on? Be as specific as you can.
And who were the Iron Guards, if you would describe them?
The Iron Guards were the SS of Romania. They were Jew haters who were now sanctioned to do as they wished with Jewish lives.
Military? Do we have to
they
think
had
of them as
a uniform of some sorts, black, as far as I remember, black. They might have worn armbands. I really don't remember seeing so much of them as hearing about them. As I said, I was sheltered from the whole thing. For me, the whole thing was very shocking. I don't think that my parents believed that the day will come that we will be driven out of our homes, never to come back. Now, what happened was one night we were sleeping, and there was knocking at the windows. And my mother thought that she's called away to help someone, either a birth or someone sick. And no, the neighbor said, because one of my oldest brother that was at home, Chaim, said that he was a communist. And therefore, the whole family was on the list to be shot the following day. So this neighbor came and said, please leave your homes and run away, because tomorrow morning they will kill you.
Was that a Jewish neighbor?
No,
Were you
no,
going,
a Gentile neighbor.
were you going to be shot because one of your brothers was a communist, or
Right.
because you were Jews?
Because we were Jews and because my brother was a communist. In fact, he was caught and shot.
Did you live in a Jewish neighborhood? I'm still going back to Herzog in that sort of like in-between
okay.
period, just before things really get awful.
I wouldn't say that in 41, where we lived, was a Jewish neighborhood, because I remember there were Gentile neighbors on all sides. I remember they always came to our house and they were eating and feasting, and I always knew that I could not have anything in their house, and it was very strange.
Because of the dietary laws?
Because of our dietary laws, yes. Because they knew. They knew, and I thought that they understood.
But on the whole, relations, you are saying?
Very good. One of my closest friends in 1941, before the war broke out, before the 1941 year to start, I went to a school. I learned Russian. I was not anymore in the Jewish school because those were closed with the Russian occupation. And my closest friend was a Gentile child. We were buddies. I thought that we loved each other until when we ran away, and I ran back to go up to the attic and to retrieve my silver cup, my Passover cup. And this girl came at me with a knife to kill me. So this was very shocking for me.
Your friend?
My very best friend, a child my own age.
See, in a way I don't want to interrupt you, and I want you to just continue on, but on the other hand, there's something, I used the word intriguing before for lack of a better adjective, there's something so incomprehensible about it. We've talked about this before with others in different countries. Now we're in Romania. Romania, that part of Romania is under Russia right now. The Russian pact between Hitler and Stalin is now gone, and there is a war on, and the war pushes the Germans into Romania. Things haven't been that great for the Jews really for some time.
You're right.
I mean, even
Right.
under King Carol, things were not that great for the Jews. But now it seems things take a turn for the much and much worse,
Absolutely.
and large amounts of Jews get thrown out of their homes and start fleeing. And I'm intrigued what it is exactly that you can remember, that you can give us from that period. I would like you to even go back a little bit further in history and tell us what you remember of relationship between Jews and non-Jews, what it was like to be a Jew, how did it feel like to be a Jew in Romania in that time,
Right.
and whether there were any incidents of anti-Semitism.
As soon as the Nazis were approaching and the Iron Guard got a lot of courage, they burned down, I remember, the streets, the stores. They looted and they set fire to Jewish businesses immediately. This is already 1940, 41. It was not safe for people to go to their businesses. So first, there was the trauma. When the Russians came, they took away the rich people. And then the Iron Guards, whoever was left, they destroyed them. But my earliest memory, if you want, living in this isolation, happy cocoon of a Jewish family who was surrounded by love and Jewish festivals and Shabbat and everything that makes Jewish family life a happy one and a rich, fulfilled one. I remember Easter was the most difficult time for us. We were told that when we go out on the street, I remember from my earliest memory, I must say, Christos anviat, Christ came to life. And they would answer, Adevarat kanviat, it's true he came to life, unless they would beat us up. Now, I couldn't have been more than 4 years old one day that I ventured outside. I was a mischievous child and I probably couldn't be kept in the house for too long. I went outside to play and some Romanian children caught me and they said that I killed Christ. I killed Jesus. I don't know. In my house, if a fly came in, it was chased out. It was not killed. My mother would not kill any creature or any of us. And yet, I was beaten up. I came into the house bleeding. Mommy, who did I kill? And she says, what happened? I told her, they say I killed Jesus. Who is that? Of course, I had no idea who Jesus was at that age. And I remember my mother taking me into her arms and cover me with her tears, explaining to me that I had not killed anyone, that it's just something that some people say because they're angry, that really I didn't do anything wrong. And just, I should learn my lesson that when she tells me not to go out, I should stay indoors because it's not safe to go out. And this I had to learn very early in life. And later on it came into good stead because during the Holocaust, I was more afraid of children than I was of grown-ups. Because children, given permission, can become very cruel. Not all children, some children who are not raised with value of life, period. I'm not saying Jewish life, of all humans and of all God's creatures. They can turn very, very criminal, as later on is going to come out, what happened in the Ukraine. But in Romania, even the people I had known and went to school with, I had to watch myself from being beaten up and from being crippled, as they were very vicious. But nonetheless, I must say that I was very happy to be what I was. It never occurred to me to envy anyone that was not Jewish, that I would like to be like them. It never occurred. Throughout the war, throughout my darkest times, I never for a moment regretted being what I was. And now I understand. Now I understand because the alternative, not being brought up with any ethical morals and values, can turn a person into what happened in the Holocaust and what is happening now in all kinds of corners in the world. If we don't have the knowledge that life is holy, that we have no right to take life, that we have to help anyone who's in need. If we don't have the values that the Torah gives us, then we can turn into, which I can't say even a beast, because it's an insult to a beast to say that what humans did, beasts don't do, because beasts kill to survive or when they're frightened. These people killed for joy, simply because there was a Jew. And when they killed you immediately, it was with chesed, it was humane. But when they tormented you, that was very cruel and very evil. And this happens, for this reason, I have never envied them, and I never wanted to be one of them. And thank God that I am not. So, this covers, but the suddenness with which our life was, we were running all over the place. At one time, we were lined up, we were in another city. I don't remember names. We were in another city, and we were having a Shabbat meal, and the windows were closed, and it was very dark. And then the banging came on the door, open up, and my mother and father sent us out, all the children, to hide, And they too stayed to face whatever it was they had to face. And when they saw the plates on the table, they knew that there were more people. And then my parents came and called us in, and they took us out, and they lined us up to be shot. And a few of them were standing with their guns. And then just when we said goodbye to one another, suddenly one of them said, "Stop, you can't shoot this family. This woman brought me into the world and healed me many a time. Don't kill them." And so they put down their guns and they just let us go.
Who said that?
One of the
Romanians who were busy killing, who were busy rounding up Jews and killing. But then the orders came out that we all the Jews have to go to their original cities. So we went back to our original cities. Time has no meaning for me. I don't know how long we were where and when. I remember my mother busily digging holes around the house and hiding. I have no idea what she was hiding, and safe things that will she used to say, "It'll come in handy when we come back. We can't take everything with us, but when we come back, we will need in order to live." It didn't occur to us that we will never come back. And then we were told to line up in the middle of the night. We were told to leave our house. Must have been the middle of the night. I remember in the darkness, we were putting on feverishly as many things as we could on each other. And we were going to the marketplace because we were allowed to take very little with us. But my father took his tallis and tefillin, first thing. The rabbi took the Torah. We came to the marketplace, and then they started marching us. They marched us for months on end. It came back to me when the Kurds were running in the rain, when they were walking with their children. It brought back the death march to me, and I cried for the Kurds, and I cried for me, because I was walking there with them and running away. There was no protection from the elements or anything. But being, one of the times while we were marching in the very beginning, there was a German car drove by, and their guns were out of the windows at all times. And he stopped right in front of us, and he commanded us to stop. And he said, me, my hair was never cut. I had long, long, long white golden locks, braids. He says, "This child is not Jewish." My mother was dark, my father was kind of reddish, and my twins were blonde, but for some reason they picked on me. This child isn't Jewish, and they insisted to take me away. And it was horrible. I remember I was totally confused. I didn't know what was happening. My mother fell on her knees, and my father and the sisters and brothers said, "Leave her. Whatever happens to us, she's ours." And they left me. They left me and they drove off. Lassen Sie hieß es. And at that very moment, I wasn't aware of it, but at that very moment was planted the seed in my mind for my hiding later on. Later on, when I was left all alone, I knew that as a Jew I will not survive. So I started pretending that I was not a Jew, till eventually, later on, I actually went into hiding. But this march, I'm going back and forth, this march lasted for several months.
We're in the fall of 1941.
We're in the fall, and we came, but by the time we reached Dniester, which was a place called Atake, it was already winter. But it's interesting, one time they stopped. From time to time they let us stay for a few days and rest. I guess they needed a rest. And our place on the ground was near a bakery. And I noticed that from the bakery came out a little girl. She was going in and out with her books. And I decided to start a conversation with her. And I asked her what she was learning in school. And apparently she was having difficulty with her studies. And I became her tutor. I told her, bring your books and I'll help you. And I became her tutor. And her mother came out and she said she did so much better in school. And so she offered me, every time I tutored her, she gave us a loaf of bread. So you can imagine that was another thing that started out, that I became the provider for my family. Because I was the one who looked Christian, so I would get out of the ghetto, tell them that I was not Jewish. It was no problem getting out, because once you knew the ways, you got out. I knew the language. That year of learning Russian prepared me for what was to come again.
That was Ukraine already.
The Ukraine,
You
yes.
were in Ukraine.
In Bessarabia and going into the Ukraine. When we got to the Ukraine, first of all in Ataki, I must say that there was a horrible, horrible thing.
Is this on this side
On
of the
this side,
Dniester, or
on
have
this
we
side of
crossed
the
over
Dniester,
now?
on this side of the
And that's
Dniester.
also where you met the girl whom you tutored?
No, met the
That was
girl
later.
a few weeks before, where I was tutoring her, and then we left, and
And you
that
moved
was the
on.
end of our
Still on the Romanian side of the river?
Bessarabia, yes.
Yeah, Bessarabia.
And in Ataki, we all stopped, and we slept the night. And the Romanians decided to clean the Jews of their possessions. And I must say that during the march, I was also very lucky. For somehow, I had the animalistic instinct of surviving. I went to the Romanians who were driving with the food, and I asked them if I could sit in the wagon where the food was kept. They put blankets around me, and they let me. This is the reason why I made it so far, because I was actually in the wagons with the food. I was transported along the route, and my one brother, who was still living at that time, Ben Zion, he used to check on me from time to time to see if I was alive, if they were not hurting me, and so on. I lost track. My brother and my father fell that night. He disappeared. No one saw my brother dead. He was 17. But my father, my mother saw him. He had whatever possessions we had, and they tried to take them from him, and he paid with his life. So the following day, as we were getting ready to cross the Dniester, I met up with my mother and 3 of my sisters. And she said to me, "Du bist ein Josef, mein Kind. You are an orphan." They killed many, many Jews that night in Ataki, and I never found out what happened to my brother. We crossed to the other side, and many people couldn't make it on that bridge. They had a mobile bridge to cross us on. They threw so many into the water. Their screams have followed me all my life. I have never learned to swim, because every time I hit the water, I hear the people crying for help. You didn't learn to swim before the war. This was not one of the things that the Jews learned. We came to the other side. It was the most horrendous sight. The Ukrainians took good care to clean out the Jews. Rows and rows of Jews were sitting with their children in their arms, dead, shot. They hadn't buried them or taken away the bodies yet. This was welcoming us into the Ukraine. We stayed in Mogilov a little bit of time, but then they drove us. They didn't let us stay in Mogilov. They drove us on to eventually Kopygorod. Before we got there, my little sister died, Devora. And we came to Kopygorod. It was my mother and the twin sisters. All this while, every time we stopped, I'd break out of the compound and I'd go to the Russians and beg and plead for some food. I'll do anything. Sometimes they gave me to do something in the field, and sometimes not, and sometimes they just gave me bits and pieces. Whatever I brought, my mother would share with other children, even though there was very, very little. She herself never ate anything other than what she would pick up in the field. Frozen beets, potatoes, whatever she could find in the field. This is what sustained her.
Were there rations
There were no rations. You were not given food.
at all?
No.
Not any time
What? Not at all.
that you remember?
We were not given any food. The only thing is, each man was for himself. You couldn't walk, you were shot. If you had something, the Gentiles were standing on the sides, waiting with the bread in their hands, or salami or whatever, and they would be very specific. They wanted gold. So each of the girls had gold earrings. That kept us going for a while. My running out with my escapades to get from the Gentiles, that helped. But we were not given any food. The idea was to starve us and to kill us
What about water?
on the death march.
What about water?
No. To this day, there's something in me that I thirst a lot. I needed water. I remember waiting for the rain to settle in the mud and going down on my fours and drinking from the mud puddles water. We had no access to water. We had no access to food. We were just driven. They didn't care whether we were hungry or thirsty.
Would you stop at night?
Yes,
You remember that?
yes, they stopped at night in a field or whatever.
And then?
And then the next day we were driven again.
There was no cover, nothing?
No.
Because
We huddled together. We kept each other warm with our bodies. And if we had any covering, we would put it over our heads and breathe into it and create warmth.
were you able to sleep that way?
Yes. I mean, we didn't think about comforts. By this time, I felt totally dehumanized. For some reason, I felt that it's kind of a punishment. I have no idea for what. But I felt that I must have done something bad. And every time something happened that was worse and worse, I felt the end is going to come soon. People were dying all over the place. My mother was sure that Mashiach is going to come because she was fasting on a death march. She was fasting every Monday and Thursday. Because according to Jewish tradition, Mashiach comes when the world is totally evil or totally good. And it couldn't have been more evil than it was at that time. And she
So
felt
she-
if she's fasting, then she'll bring Mashiach sooner.
She thought that by her fasting, or she said that by her fasting, she hoped to bring about the coming of the Messiah.
She absolutely believed it. We were driven the whole time. We finally came to Kopygorod.
How
This-
many
this
of you
is-
are now still there? The
That-
brother who died was what? Was that Ben Zion or Chaim?
My brother disappeared. Chaim was shot in Romania by the Romanians.
Ben Zion?
Ben Zion disappeared that night my
That your
father was
father
shot.
died. Yes. So that just left
That
you
left
your mother and 3 sisters.
Right. And Dvora died on the way.
On the way to
Kapaygorod.
on the Ukrainian side.
Yes. And that left my twin sisters, my mother and I. My twin sisters
Liba and Rivka.
were, I would say 13, 14. They were identical twins. They must have been very pretty. I remember people talking about them when they were young, when I was young. They were young. How beautiful they were and how you couldn't tell them apart. They couldn't go out for anything because they would have been raped. So they were actually prisoners of the room in the ghetto that we were in. So that put the onus on me.
This is Kapaygorod now.
This is Kapaygorod. We were on a compound. Everyone had floor space. Everybody had enough space to sit down or lie down. No more. At the entrance of this big room, which could have been a stable, I don't know what it was. There was a little entrance. When anyone died, they put the body there. And the bodies accumulated, a mountain of bodies, until someone came from the Chevra Kadisha, some Jewish men who would carry the bodies away. I was going out in Kapaygorod to help the farmers bring in from the field to whatever could have been done. I used to knock on their door and plead and beg, I need food. Would you please help me?
You're
I
still
didn't
only
tell
9 or
them.
10 years old at this point, Leah. I mean,
This
am
is
I
still
right?
1941.
Yeah.
And where is your family? And I said to them, oh, I don't have family, I just have some friends. And we live together far away, and they're sick, and I'm helping them. And I need you to give me, because they would give me something to eat, but they didn't have much to give. And whatever they gave me, I put in my little bag. And I would come back, and it was quite a distance away from the ghetto. I would come back, and my mother and my sisters would wait for this.
You were passing that time. You were not telling them you were Jewish.
The minute I crossed the ghetto, of course, I was not Jewish. Then I was going in and out. And somehow I knew whom to watch, when it's safe, where it's safe. Don't ask me how, I knew. Because the fact is that I went and I came. And there were 2 other girls who attached themselves to me. But when we went into a little village, we were on our own. And then we were to meet and go back together. We met, and they were lucky. They filled up their bags. They were really lucky. And they went back to Kapaygorod. And I said to them, I don't have enough food to go back with. I will stay another day. And the 2 girls, but this already was winter, was snow, were captured by some Ukrainian children. And they were killed. They were cut up into pieces. And their families found out, and my mother found out, and she thought that I too was dead. By the time I came back, I found my mother lying dead on the floor. Previous to that, my sisters had died and their bodies were in the corridor. I walked in and out, seeing their bodies on a pile of bodies. I didn't cry. I wasn't sad. It was a question of time that I knew that I too will be on that heap of bodies. It was inevitable. But when my mother died, I don't know how I made it without her. I sold everything I had. She was totally uncovered, lying dead. Sold everything I had. and I bought her a slip to cover her. So when they carried her away, you would not see her nakedness. A Jewish family that had children decided to take care of me.
Your two sisters, now let me just
My
recapitulate.
two sisters
this.
died
They have already died prior to your mother
I was
dying?
my mother's last hope.
So when you went out that day for several days to go to the village, your sisters had already died?
They had already died, yes.
And you saw them?
Yes.
What do you think they died
They
of?
died of hunger. They were just skin and bones, beyond recognition. So I was my mother's last hope, but when she thought that I was dead, she just gave up. But as I said, this Jewish family said they would take care of me, but they gave their children what was good, and they gave me what was to be thrown away. A sense of justice I always had. And I decided, there's nothing to keep me in this place. I will run away. I knew that my mother had a sister in McGill who had several children with her. I think her husband was killed as well. I said, I'll make my way to McGill. How? I have no idea, but I would ask.
Could you fill us in how far that would be from Kopygorod? Just
long
vaguely,
time.
from what you know?
I have no idea of distance.
But it's in the Ukraine?
It's in the Ukraine. Mogilov was right at the other side of the Dniester, whereas Kopygorod was
Inland.
a long time,
Right.
walking, a long time. 3 days after I left, I knocked on people's doors, they let me in. Often they would delouse me, they would take my clothes, and they put them in the oven to burn off the lice. They'd let me sleep on the pripyatchik on top of the oven. There was like an alcove that was warm. They'd wash my hair with kerosene. I must say, it was very noble of them, because if they were caught, they would have been dead. They gave me whatever little they had to eat. And to sleep, I had to sleep at night in a haystack, because on every door was posted the number of people in the house and the names of the people. And if they found one extra person, they killed everyone.
Can you explain to me whom you mean by they, if they found one extra person?
The Ukrainians. The Ukrainians. They were Germans, but the Ukrainians did the work, and in Romania, the Romanians did the work. The Ukrainians were at times more vicious than the Germans were. They were absolutely ruthless, very cruel. Especially the children, I feared. If a child met you, they would say to me, "Скажи кукуруза." Say kukuruza as a corn. I had a good R. I rolled it well, and I was fine. But most Jewish children couldn't roll the R, and they were killed on the spot.
By kids?
By that word. Just like later on, when you said Amcho, you found a Jew. When you said kukuruza, they found a Jew for death. I used to avoid children like you avoid the plague. At times, I used to sneak.
What age children are you talking about?
My
there?
age,
Starting at age 9, all the way up to?
even smaller or bigger.
What would they kill with?
What would they?
Kill with?
Oh, anything that came in their hands. Stones. They always had wood sticks. They were always prepared. They walked like murderers. They were looking for someone to kill.
What was in it for them?
Joy. Nothing else.
Because you didn't
These
have
children
much.
had
You didn't have
nothing.
much to
These
take.
children
to-
had nothing. We were children like them, trying to survive. But we were Jews. And they could have fun, at least, by watching a Jew die slowly. This was their fun. Sometimes, if the parents caught them, they would stop them, and sometimes they joined them. So much so was I afraid of children. When I came to a house, I would see smoke from the chimney. I knew people, it was inhabited. Then I would spy through the window. If I saw children, I would avoid that house. I would go look for another house.
You're talking about children. You're talking about boys or girls also?
Boys and girls.
And girls.
Boys and girls. I guess they had no fun, they had no toys, they had nothing to do, and this was their recreation.
Entertainment, yeah.
This was their passing of time. And the Jews were put there for their pleasure. And I mean it in every, I'm not saying this tongue in cheek, it was exactly that. So one day I was in this house, there was only the woman in the house, she was alone. And she was giving me something to eat. And her husband came in. And that was not too far from Kopygorod when I ran away. And he said to me, Żydówka. And once he said Żydówka means dirty Jew, I couldn't say no. I knew better than to lie and say, I'm not a Żydówka. Where are you from? And I told him I was from Kopygorod. And I told him my family died there and I'm the only one left. And I'm going to look for an aunt. And he said to me that I was a very lucky Żydówka. And I said to him, why? He said, because the day after you ran away, they took all the Jews, they drove them into the forest, and they burned them alive. So it's ironic that had my mother lived, I would have been dead too. So began my making my way to Mogilov. I walked and I walked. And sometimes a farmer would see me and he'd ask me if I wanted, where I'm going. And I'd tell him I'd go to Mogilov and he'd give me a lift, kind of, for a little while. And then I'd be warmed up.
Like on a wagon or something?
A wagon.
Yes.
A horse and a wagon, yeah, with straw or produce or whatever. But somewhere on the way, I became sick with malaria. It was that year of 1941. And I fainted. I must have had very high fever, as malaria has. I don't know who took me in, who found me. I don't know who healed me, where they kept me. I just know that a season later I was found myself on the road again.
A season
A
later,
season
like we're into
later.
the spring of 42 now.
Yeah.
You're 10?
I found myself, I was, yes, 10 by then. And I eventually made my way to Mogilov. The ghetto was an incredible, incredible hell. There was an orphanage. In the orphanage, they shaved our heads. And kids would disappear from the orphanage. And other kids would reappear, and kids would disappear. Very poorly fed, very, very little. We slept.
What do you mean, disappear?
They would disappear. Well, they sent them away to the death, but I didn't know. People came and took some children out, and then other children would come and fill the places.
But where would these children go?
Who came?
They took them away.
Who?
People,
the Jewish
police? Or Jewish
Jewish
youth and rats?
police.
Jewish police.
Why?
The Jewish
Did they have to
police.
fill quotas? What?
Quotas.
Probably.
There were several places that the Jews were sent to. I don't remember any other than the one that I was sent to later on. But I quickly realized that this orphanage is not a place for me. And I decided to find something outside the ghetto walls.
You didn't say if you did or didn't find your
I
aunt.
found my mother's sister. I found her and she was in very terrible shape. She had one child left that was very sick, a little boy my age, Arala. And she somehow managed to save him, but he had so many sicknesses that he died after the war in Bucharest. She had very precious little to give me. And so I left. I stayed with her for a few days. And I said goodbye to her and I went outside the ghetto walls. Outside the ghetto walls, there were bombed out buildings. Into these bombed out buildings, I pulled in straw, whatever I could find, and made myself a place where I could sleep.
Leah, but how can you get out of ghetto? Wasn't there a barbed wire? Wasn't there a wall?
There was always a place to escape. You see,
Did you
I
have-
watched how people came in
There had to be gates.
and through the gates. If people came in, there was a possibility to get out. I knew that I didn't look Jewish. I knew the language.
Did you have to wear
No,
a yellow
I didn't
star?
wear. The Jews did. I didn't wear.
Yellow star.
I never put it on. I did on the death march, but I never put it on after that.
Weren't you punished for it? If they catch you without it?
Outside the ghetto, I was
No,
not
no,
a Jew.
inside. Inside.
I was not a Jew. Inside the ghetto in the orphanage, we didn't wear it.
I see.
So the order of things is as follows. You reach Moigov, you find your aunt, but you don't stay,
I
and
don't
you end
stay
up
with her.
in the orphanage. You find out fairly shortly that the orphanage is the worst place to be and that your life is in danger, and sooner or later they're going to catch you and you're going to be killed.
I didn't know where those kids were going to.
But you had
I had an idea.
You had an idea
I had an
that
idea.
something is very, very bad there.
Right.
Did you pick that up almost right away, or did that take a few
Very
days,
quickly. Probably took me a few days.
or a few weeks, or whatever?
Probably took me a little while. And in the orphanage, by the way, they had cots no bigger than this size of this chair, and we slept two this way and two the other way. And one of the girls that I met later when I was to be redeemed had tuberculosis, and she was my face partner. I slept face to face with her,
But you didn't get
and I
to
did
be.
not get tuberculosis. It's incredible. She actually died in a sanatorium in Romania after the war. But outside of the ghetto, there were other smart Alex like me, children who wanted to survive. And we would meet in packs, little packs of children, but we were on our own. Whenever we did any searching for food or whatever, we didn't know one another. But we would have secret places where we would meet and comfort each other.
Can you talk about that a little bit more?
Amongst ourselves, we knew that we were Jewish.
Without ever mentioning it.
It was.
We didn't say, "Are you Jewish?"
Right. It
We
was
didn't
understood.
have to say.
It was understood.
We understood one another. And it was mixed. It was little girls and little boys. They were all very young. I don't think anyone was above 10, maybe 11. They were small, very small. The Gentiles who helped us knew or didn't know, I don't know, that we were Jewish children trying to survive. They threw us crumbs, whatever. Now, there was a lady who had what you'd call in Canada kaskrut, a buffet. She served vodka, she served cold cuts, and sandwiches, stuff like that. I don't remember what else. Across the street was a restaurant. In the yard of the restaurant was a pump for water. There was no sink in her little business. So if she wanted the dishes washed, she had to go across the street and wash them by the pump. And one day I came and I said to her, "Why don't you let me do this for you?" And she said, "You're not going to steal them and run away?" Because I could have sold them. And I said, "Give me a chance." And she gave me a chance. I went and I washed the front of the dish. I didn't wash the back. So she sent me back. She said, "I have to look at the back also. Both sides of the dish have to be washed." And so I had my first lesson on how to wash dishes. And she trusted me. I took out all the waste, and I made sure that it was well searched, that little pieces of stuff, of solubles that I saved. And slowly, slowly, she started to trust me more and more. She had no children.
Do you know her name?
Bukovska. She was Bukovska. And
Mrs. Buchowska.
Bukovska. And my name was Lydia.
But, yeah.
To remember my name, and it was a problem at night, so I gave myself the name closest to Leah, Lydia. So my name was Lydia Bukowska. I took on her name. She said, how would you like to sleep tonight in my house?
Till then you had slept?
Till then she knew that, she assumed that I was not. Till then I slept in the bombed out buildings.
With some of the other kids in the pack and all that?
Yeah. And we used to, the straw, we used to, with the little girls, we cuddled up and we breathed in. We breathed in, and this created warmth for us as much as possible, so we shouldn't freeze to death. Some of the children had frozen toes, had frozen hands, had frozen